Hi, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. So, I understand that you've written six books, but you really want to talk about your latest one, which is understandable. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and what led you to want to write?
Well, uh, I love adventure. I'm a mountain climber, climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm a distance cyclist. I've ridden my bike across Cuba. I'm really interested in learning, and when you write, you do learn quite a bit. You learn a lot about facts, people, psychology, if you will, and it's interesting to me. And I love writing. And anybody who writes not for the love is that I consider doing it for the wrong reason. And I actually did it for the wrong reason for several years. I was essentially just trying to write to get something published. So I was trying to write what I thought would sell. And then I happened to be working with a guy, and he was telling me about some baseball coach he knew, and he was really excited about him. And I said, "Wow, you really sound excited about this guy." And he says, "Oh yeah," he said, "I wrote a article and it got published in the paper." So he brought it in, I read it, and it was good, uh, but it wasn't anything. It was on par with my writing. But I realized at that moment that the reason he was able to get published was because he had passion. He had passion about his subject, which was this baseball coach. And it was an epiphany for me. And I decided at that point, the only thing I'm going to write about is things that I'm passionate about.
Hmm.
I changed gears from what I just thought would sell to no, I'm just going to do what I'm passionate about. And I sold 5 articles the very first year.
Wow.
And then I started on my first book, which was One Eye Jack, about a professional blackmailer. And it started as a short story, but as probably happens with a lot of writers, you fall in love with your character. And so the One Eye Jack short story ended up becoming One Eye Jack the novel, which was a Shamus Award finalist in, I think it was 2012 or 2013. And it was a Writer's Digest honorable mention for genre fiction. And it's since become a series. I have 4 books in the series. I'm going to be working on another one. But again, I was passionate about this, my character, this concept of somebody who is a professional blackmailer. How do they operate? What's their business plan, if you will? And so from that, I ended up. I was halfway between. I was starting on the second book, and then there was a character from a television show, Leave It to Beaver, who passed away. I don't know. Have you?
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. Yeah. Of
Okay.
course, I know the show. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, I didn't know who he was. He was the character. He was the character Lumpy on the show. His name was Frank Bank, and he passed away. And it trended on Yahoo for 3 days. And I thought, wow, 50 years later, there's still a lot of interest in this show. So I looked at. He had written a biography. Jerry Mathers, who played the Beaver, had written a biography. But to me, the most important character of the whole show, Eddie Haskell, had no biography. So I sent Ken Osmond, who played Eddie, I sent him a copy of One Eye Jack along with a pitch letter, and I promptly forgot about it. You shoot a lot of arrows into the air as a writer, and hopefully something will hit. And I didn't hear anything, and I just kind of moved on. And next thing you know, I get a phone call from about a month and a half later, and he wanted to sit down and talk about writing my book. He said, "Let's have a beer and talk about you writing my life story," which I tell people I was obviously thrilled, not just because I was going to get to write his life story, but I was drinking with Eddie Haskell.
That's
So,
great.
so that was a lot of fun, and had a great time writing the book, and it's done very, very well. And so then I started on another book, which was called Dark State, and I was a former industrial electrician. And the impetus for Dark State was I was sitting in a meeting one time. We had a big project, and somebody asked about the delivery time of a piece of equipment, and they said, "Oh, that's 9 months to a year out." And I realized then that all of this equipment was specialized, it's custom made, including the high power transformers that run the electrical grid. They are what I call the big links in the chain. And so it just got my devious mind thinking that I I wondered what would it be like if there was a critical piece of equipment with a long lead time that was critical to the electrical grid, and it got destroyed, taken out, sabotaged, whatever. And I found that these transformers were that big link. And so I started putting together Dark State, which was the longest book I've ever written. It took me the longest amount of time, 6 years to write, but I did extensive research. And what's great, I talked to experts in first response, medical, communications, uh, even a dairy farmer, because everything will get affected if the power grid goes down.
Yeah.
Everything. You're right back to the Stone Age, essentially. And yeah, and a lot of the information was actually available online from government websites. So I was able to glean from these government websites the same way a terrorist does, all this information about how vulnerable they were, where they were located. There's literally, the US government has maps online that you can pull up. There's no security clearance required, and you can literally look at where all the power lines go, where all the natural gas pipelines go, where oil pipelines are, even where the strategic petroleum reserves are located. Everything is open out there, which is like the best gift to anybody who wants to do any monkey business out there.
Sure. Yeah.
So wrote the book, and it's done well. Got a lot of good reviews on it, and possibly thinking about doing a sequel.
Right.
So, but it's just staggering to me, and most people don't realize it. I mean, we think of a power failure as, hey, the lights are going to be out for a while, and don't open the refrigerator too much until the power comes back on. But if you're talking about a piece of equipment that's a year lead time, you're not going to survive.
In your story, which country is the one doing this bad thing to America?
China. China, looking to cripple the United States once and for all.
Yeah.
They have huge ambitions, for world dominance. And, like I said, you don't have to take out the whole United States. California, you just need to take out California. It's like, taking out the Achilles heel of a giant, and he's down. So China is behind it, but they use proxies in this.
Yeah.
So
why do you think that this fascination, and I share this fascination, why do you think we here in the West love dystopian stories?
That's a good question. And I do have my own kind of wild ass theory, if you will. And I think it's because man, and this is why I think we go to horror movies, why we ride roller coasters. It's for that thrill of terror. Because way back when, during the Stone Age, we were being chased by animals, and we had to deal with all sorts of stuff. So your adrenaline level was probably a lot higher a lot of times. But we don't have that in our civilized society. And so I think there's almost a longing in people that they want to be kind of scared, terrified. They say man is the only animal that enjoys scaring itself. And the reason for that is because most of the time we don't have anything that scares us. We're not like an animal that's out there that has another animal that wants to eat it, and so forth. So we don't have a lot of predators as others do in the animal kingdom. So we have to kind of create our own fantasies around this. And I think there's also a case to be made that maybe people like just kind of want to in a safe manner, just like a roller coaster, as long as it's maintained, it's a safe way to get a thrill, to actually terrorize yourself for that minute, or whatever, and you've got your adrenaline pumping, but that it's going to be okay. Same way possibly with these dystopian movies, where you get a chance to kind of like see into what would it be like if society broke down and so forth and so on, without having to really experience it. So now coming as I did from Los Angeles, growing up there. Uh, I was where I lived. We were about 7 miles. I don't know if you've heard of the Watts riots in 1965.
No, I don't.
Okay, they were these riots in this part of LA, and it was national news. And they were within 5 miles of our house. And I was a kid, so I didn't remember much. But uh, the riots in 1992, after the Rodney King verdict came out, and I remember driving home that day from work, and you could just sense this kind of like terror in people's the way they were driving, the expressions you could see in their as they're driving their cars. Everybody was racing to get their kids to get home to do whatever, and it was pretty wild. Dark State has a lot of elements of that, where pretty soon it's like people are killing each other for a bottle of water, because it gets bad enough, and it will. And there's only you're for instance, your cell phone towers, at least in California and in the States, there's no mandate that they have to have backup generators. There are some that do, but most rely on batteries. Those batteries are only good for about 2 days, 2 to 4 days. And if everybody is trying to make a call, which everybody will be, which always happens in these sort of situations, it's going to just overload the system, and those batteries are going to drain right down. So in, say, 2 days, you don't have any communications like you used to. Most people have gotten rid of their landline. So you have no communication. You have no money. All the banks don't have backup generators. All the ATMs are going to be down. The banks can't open the vault even to start their day without power. So you're not going to have money. You're not going to have communication. Your water pumps, they run on electricity. Now, most of the water companies have backup generators either standing by there, or they will get them and bring them, keep the water on. And we'll get back to that. All right. All your refrigerated food, that's all going to spoil.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be just crazy. Fuel. Gas stations do not have backup generators in California. Maybe a handful of them do.
Yeah, you can't pump the fuel, right?
You can't pump the fuel. So you have no money. You can't communicate with anybody. The water may go off. Food is getting very scarce, and you can't put gasoline in your car. The biggest problem with backup generators, which I remember talking to a lot of people, and they'd say, and like I said, I was an electrician, and I would ask them, hey, so what happens if you guys have a power cut? And they said, oh, well, we have a backup generator. And I said, oh, really? Do you test it? Yeah, we test it once a month. Well, they test it by just starting it up, letting it idle, and playing on their phones for 15 minutes, check the box. Okay, it ran. That doesn't test a generator fully, because you're not putting it under load. You literally have to switch it over, put it under load. Hospitals do a great job of this, and some stores do, but most don't. FEMA has done a study which states that in 24 hours, about 20 to 25% of backup generators will fail. So right off the bat, you're losing about 25% of your generator capacity. The biggest problem of all, though, is even if you had enough generators, there's not enough fuel trucks to keep the fuel resupplied. So for long, generators are running dry. Maybe it's operating that municipal water pump. Now you turn the tap on, there's no water pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Now what do you do?
Yeah.
So
we see an increase in people doing homesteading, going off the grid, as they call it. And then, of course, there's preppers. I know someone who lives in New York City in an apartment tower, and he stores water, and there's a special chemical you put in the water to keep it good for like 5 years. Do you do any of that?
we do, and that was mostly coming from earthquake country in California.
Right.
So we have a 50-gallon drum of water. We have MREs. we have emergency food supplies, we have hand crank radios, we have a supply of batteries. And then we even have a jacuzzi, which holds 450 gallons of water.
Okay.
So, and people will tell you that, well, you can't drink that water. It's got chemicals in it and everything. And I'm like, well, you're either going to die of thirst or you're going to drink that water, and show me any kid that ever died from going to a public swimming pool and inhaling a bunch of water during the day.
Right.
So we're pretty prepared, but even at that, no man is an island, and you need other people and other skills. So say you're like me, an electrician. Okay, I can get things done around here and so forth. But what if I have an abscessed tooth? Where's the dentist? So living off the grid, that's great until you need something else. And even living off the grid, there's certain things we just have to rely on each other for.
Yeah.
Such as medical.
Yeah. You're right. A tooth can bring you down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So actually one of the characters in Dark State is a prepper. And he's got a bunker up in the hills, and he sets out booby traps. He's pretty paranoid. And so he has this thing all figured out. Well, he learns pretty quickly that trying to be a one-man show is not the easiest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So he's one of the characters. I guess I can tell you about the characters in the book.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
So one is the paranoid prepper. The other one is a self-absorbed Hollywood actor. And another one is a homeless vet with PTSD, a single mom raising kids, and she manages a grocery store. And then the head of Cal OES, newly minted, if you will, head of Cal OES, which Cal OES is California Office of Emergency Services, which also helped me a lot with my research and for my book. And I actually sat down and talked to their experts before I continued on the book, because I wanted to make sure, am I really getting this right? Is this how bad this is going to be? And talking with their experts, they all agreed. They said, we'll be back in the Stone Age in 3 days, is what they said. And there's no way you can support 40 million people.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was to give them a gallon of water every day. That's 40 million gallons of water delivered every single day. It's just not going to happen.
I used to climb mountains too, and in the old days, I used Halzone tablets to like the military use. Of course, it's not very good for your thyroid. You could always boil water, and then later on, I bought a fancy, expensive water filtering device, and that worked.
Right.
So I climbed in the Adirondacks. I never did Kilimanjaro, but still climbed. And you can drink groundwater. Doesn't taste very good, but you have to boil it or use Halzone or filter it.
Right.
Yeah. So what if it came down to that? Do you see people being able to do that? I mean, you'd have to be a pretty tough person to do that on a regular basis,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, short term, they would, but I think we're pretty soft in our society now.
Yeah.
And I don't think people are prepared. Some people don't even have bank accounts, don't have, money. A lot of people don't have enough food to sustain them, for even a couple days.
So.
And I think it also comes down to, like anything, it comes down to your mentality, and your drive and your will to survive and so forth.
Yeah.
So I really see a lot of people just, quote, checking out.
Yeah, sure.
Where they just shut down, and then that's it, and die or commit suicide, because it's hopeless. Like I said, 40 million people is a lot of people.
It's more people than in Canada.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So do you see yourself in any of the characters that you've developed?
I definitely see a lot of character traits. When you're writing fictional characters, one of the beauties of it is that you get to do and say things that you can't do, in real life for the most part, either circumstances or societal norms, especially my character, One-Eyed Jack, the blackmailer. So you're living vicariously through your characters. Now, there's also other characters where I've modeled them after other people I know. And matter of fact, my very first book, one of the characters in there, a lot of people I worked with, they said, "Hey, your character so-and-so, is that so-and-so from work?" And I said, "Yeah." They go, "I thought so. I recognize that." And I remember one time I was writing a book and I had to go to a church that I was going to kind of model after for the setting. And I knew a girl that I had gone to grade school with, went to the church. And so I remember I was sitting there and I was looking around and I saw her and I recognized her immediately. She's one of those people just didn't seem to change much over the years. And she didn't recognize me. So I sat there and I observed her. And I don't know if you heard the expression a hot mess, but she just was kind of just all scatterbrained and everything like that. And I remember looking at her and I told myself, "Anne, you don't know this, but you're going to be in my book." So I modeled a character after her. And anybody who writes knows that the funnest characters are, bitches, bullies, and bastards. The interesting characters, the ones with problems, they're the most fun to write.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've not only taken characters, but I've even taken like maybe background. Somebody tells me something, and I just kind of remember it and I log it. And for instance, in my book, Dark State, Shanice Dixon, who is the newly minted head of Cal OES, I have her as being a twin. And when she was young, and she's extremely driven. And when she was young, her father, who was a social psychologist, he just decided for fun he was going to give the two of them an IQ test and see how they did on it. Well, her sister did better than her. And it just stuck with her. And she just drove and drove and drove to become better than her sister. And so she went on to get dual degrees, masters, and so forth and so on, and extremely determined and hard charging. And that came from a story a guy at work told me about. He and his brother one time, his dad had given them IQ tests, and he scored higher than his brother. And it just stuck with his brother, and his brother ended up becoming an MD, a doctor. And he was just so disappointed that how could he not be on par, especially with somebody who's your twin, because you're thinking you're sharing a lot of DNA together. And it just got in his craw. And so I'll use that background, things like that, things I've heard. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I do see some of my traits in my characters for sure.
Yeah. So it took you 6 years to write Dark State. When was it published?
Let's see, what was it? I think it was July of 2022.
Okay. And how are sales for you?
They're good. They're steady. I'm not getting as many reviews as I was hoping, but I think, I don't know if I'm kidding myself, but I think part of that could be because of the fact it's such a long book. And so a lot of people, I think, Amazon will send out that thing maybe a week later wanting you to give it a review. And I don't think if people have finished the book, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. But the reviews I have gotten are really, really good. So, and the sales, they're steady. The biggest seller I have, though, is the Eddie Haskell book. And that's because of his name.
Yeah.
But I always like to say they buy the book because of Eddie Haskell, but the reviews I feel are all mine.
Sure.
I've had great reviews where people said, "I read it all in one sitting, couldn't put it down." I had one review where somebody said, "I loved it so much I read it twice," which is that will make your day.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Well, Chris, our chat is coming to an end by the looks of it, and it's been a real pleasure meeting you. and hearing
Pleasure
about
meeting you, John.
your stories. And I do wish you well. And if you ever write another book in the future, or you want to talk about more about your other ones, you let me know and we can do this again.
Will do.
All right.
Appreciate it.
You take
All
care of
right.
yourself now.
You too. Thank you.
And that's our show for today. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. And if you are a self-published author, I would really like to speak with you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.